It started with 4 words, just 4 little words whispered into a phone, not meant for my ears, that took the 22 years of my marriage and torched them. I'd always believed we were solid, a bedrock in a world of shifting sands. But as I stood frozen in the hallway, listening to my wife describe me as too predictable, I felt the ground crumble beneath my feet. The initial shock felt like a physical blow, a theft of air from my lungs, followed by a rage so cold it burned. But rage is a fire that consumes you. I chose a different path. A plan began to form in the quiet, methodical corners of my mind, the very part of me she'd grown to resent. She wanted unpredictable. She had no idea what was coming. You think you know how this ends, a messy divorce, a screaming match, a quiet heartbreak, think again. What I uncovered next and what I did with it changed everything. Before diving in, hit that subscribe button and comment below. Have you ever dealt with betrayal? Let's hear your stories. Part 1, The Hum of Discontent. Our life was a carefully curated portrait of suburban success. A 2-story colonial in a quiet cul-de-sac, a manicured lawn I mowed every Saturday, 2 kids successfully launched into college, and a marriage that from the outside looked as solid and dependable as the oak tree in our front yard. I'm Mark, 48 years old, and for 2 decades, I've been a logistics manager for a national shipping company. My world is one of timetables, efficiency, and predictable outcomes. I find comfort in it. I make sure packages get from point A to point B on time every time. It's what I'm good at. I brought that same reliability home. The mortgage was always paid, the cars were serviced, and if Claire mentioned a leaky faucet, I had my toolkit out before she finished her sentence. I thought that was love. I thought that was enough. The signs were there, of course. They always are, aren't they? Hindsight is a cruel editor, highlighting all the foreshadowing you missed in the first draft of your life. It started subtly, a low-frequency hum of dissatisfaction I couldn't quite place. Claire, my vibrant, once spontaneous wife, had started to feel distant. She'd taken up new hobbies with a fervor that felt less like passion and more like an escape. First, it was pottery, her hands constantly caked in a clay that seemed to form a barrier between us. Then it was hot yoga, from which she'd returned flushed and glowing, her eyes shining with an energy that was no longer directed at me. "It's about finding my inner fire," she'd said, stretching her lithe frame in the living room. I'd smiled from my armchair, newspaper in hand. "Looks like you found it." "You're practically glowing." I meant it as a compliment, a simple observation from her husband of 22 years, but she just gave a tight, unreadable smile and flowed into another pose. The conversation, like so many others, was over before it began. Her phone, once a casual accessory, had become a fifth limb. It was always in her hand, angled away from me with a practiced defensiveness. Notifications pinged at all hours, and she'd silence them with a speed that was almost surgical. When I'd ask who was texting so late, the answer was always a variation of the same theme, just Susan or the yoga group chat, vague. Impersonal, we used to share everything. Our days would spill out over the dinner table, a messy, chaotic, and beautiful blend of office politics, kid troubles, and neighborhood gossip. Now our evenings were punctuated by the silence of scrolling. She'd laugh at something on her screen, and when I'd ask what was funny, she'd wave a dismissive hand. "Oh, it's just a silly meme. You wouldn't get it." The "you" in that sentence felt like a judgment. You, the predictable man. You, the one who finds comfort in routine. You, the one who wouldn't understand the vibrant, exciting world contained in that little glowing rectangle. The intimacy we'd built over 2 decades felt like it was being siphoned off, redirected into a digital world I wasn't privy to. Sex had become a scheduled event, pleasant but lacking the spark that once left us breathless and laughing in the dark. It felt like another item on a checklist, a maintenance chore to keep the machinery of our marriage from seizing up completely. I tried, God, I tried. I suggested a weekend trip to the coast, a place we hadn't visited since the kids were small. "Oh, I can't, Mark," she'd said, barely looking up from her laptop. "I have that wellness retreat with the girls. A new group of friends from her yoga studio, all sleek ponytails, expensive athletic wear, and a shared vocabulary of empowerment I didn't speak. They called each other goddesses. To them, I was probably just the guy who paid the mortgage for the temple. I remember one night feeling a desperate need to connect. I came up behind her while she was doing the dishes, wrapping my arms around her waist, inhaling the familiar scent of her hair. For a second, she leaned back into me, and my heart swelled with a painful hope. Then she stiffened. "Mark, I'm trying to get this done," she said, her voice flat. She gently but firmly removed my hands. It wasn't a rejection, not exactly. It was a dismissal. I was a minor inconvenience, a distraction from the task at hand. I retreated to the living room, the space between us feeling as wide and cold as an ocean. The hum of discontent was growing louder, and I was beginning to fear it was the sound of something breaking. Part 2, the forward dagger. It was a Tuesday. I remember that because I always left work early on Tuesdays to beat the traffic for my weekly poker game. A ritual Claire often joked was the most predictable thing about me. That day, my 3 o'clock meeting was canceled, so I decided to head home even earlier. I had this idea, a small, hopeful gesture to surprise her. I stopped at the fancy Italian deli and picked up prosciutto, fresh mozzarella, and a bottle of the Chianti she loved. I imagined us sitting on the back deck, sharing a glass, maybe reconnecting for a few minutes before I had to leave. A stupid, hopeful, predictable thought. I pulled into the driveway at 4:15. Her car was there. I let myself in through the garage, the familiar scent of laundry detergent and sawdust greeting me. The house was quiet. I put the wine and groceries on the kitchen counter, my little peace offering. I was about to call out her name when I heard her voice, a low murmur coming from the back deck. She was on the phone. I smiled, thinking I'd wait for her to finish before announcing my arrival. I crept to the sliding glass door, wanting to see her relax in the afternoon sun. She was pacing the deck, her back to me, phone pressed to her ear. She was laughing, a light, carefree sound I hadn't heard directed at me in months. It was the laugh she used to have when we were first dating, the one that made me feel like the cleverest man on earth. I know, she was saying, still chuckling. "He's a good man, Susan. He's reliable. He's solid." A pause. I felt a swell of pride. Solid, reliable. I could live with that. But then came the shift, the drop in her tone that signaled a confession. "But that's the problem. After all these years," she sighed, a sound heavy with a weariness that felt ancient. "He's just too predictable." The words didn't register at first. They floated in the space between the kitchen and the deck, unreal and disconnected, too predictable. It wasn't an insult shouted in anger. It was worse. It was a calm, factual diagnosis delivered to a friend, a statement of terminal boredom. The prosciutto on the counter suddenly seemed pathetic. The wine felt like a cheap prop in a play where I was the fool. My blood ran cold. Every predictable thing I'd ever done flashed before my eyes. Mowing the lawn on Saturdays, making coffee the same way every morning, my Tuesday poker night, the way I always kissed her on the left side of her forehead before leaving for work. These weren't acts of love and stability anymore. They were counts in an indictment against me. They were the bars of a cage she felt trapped in. I backed away from the door, my movements silent, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I retreated through the kitchen, out into the garage, my breath coming in ragged, shallow gasps. I slid back into my car, the leather seat still warm from the sun. I felt nothing and everything all at once. It was a physical sensation, a punch to the gut that left me winded and hollow. I started the car and backed out of the driveway as quietly as I could. As I drove away, I glanced in my rearview mirror. She was still on the deck, bathed in the golden afternoon light, still talking on the phone, completely oblivious. She had just taken a knife to the foundation of our life, and she didn't even know I was bleeding. Too predictable. The 4 words echoed in the sudden, deafening silence of my car. Fine, I thought, a strange, cold clarity cutting through the pain. You want unpredictable, challenge accepted. Part 3, a ghost in my own home. The next few days, I moved through my life like a ghost. I was present in body, but my mind was elsewhere, replaying those 4 words on an endless, torturous loop. I became an observer in my own home, a detective on a case where I was also the victim. Every interaction with Claire was now filtered through a lens of suspicion. Her smiles seemed manufactured, her touches perfunctory. I started noticing things I had previously ignored, connecting dots that had been floating randomly in the space between us. The late-night texts weren't just from the yoga group. I saw a name flash on her screen before she snatched the phone away. Julian, just a name, but it felt heavy, foreign. The wellness retreat she was so excited about. When I casually asked for the name of the resort, she faltered for a second too long before naming a spa 2 hours away. A quick search on my work computer told me the place specialized in couples tantric workshops. I was drowning in a sea of small lies and half-truths. The worst part was the performance. I had to pretend everything was normal. I had to sit across from her at the dinner table and ask about her day, nodding and smiling as she talked about her pottery class, all the while wondering if her hands had been on someone else. I had to lie next to her in bed, the 6 inches between us a chasm, my body rigid with a mixture of rage and heartbreak. I'd lie awake for hours, listening to the rhythm of her breathing, the breath of a stranger. My internal turmoil was a battlefield. One part of me, the old, predictable Mark, wanted to confront her, to scream, to cry, to demand answers, to throw the evidence in her face and watch her carefully constructed world crumble. Maybe we could go to counseling, maybe we could fix this, maybe the foundation wasn't completely shattered. That was the husband in me, the man who had vowed to love and cherish her, in sickness and in health. But a new part of me was emerging, a colder, more methodical entity born in that moment in the garage. This part of me didn't want to fix things. It wanted to understand the full scope of the betrayal. It wanted to see how deep the rot went. This part of me whispered that a direct confrontation would only give her the chance to lie, to gaslight, to turn it all back on me. You're being paranoid, Mark. Julian is just a friend. You've been so distant lately. I could already hear the script. This new Mark found a grim, dark humor in the situation. My job was about logistics, about seeing the whole picture, about knowing where every piece was at any given moment. Now I was applying that same skill set to my own marriage. I was tracking a betrayal with the same dispassionate efficiency I used to track a shipment of medical supplies. The passion we once had haunted me. I'd catch a glimpse of her stepping out of the shower, a towel wrapped around her, and a memory would hit me like a rogue wave. Us years ago on a rainy Sunday, making love with an urgency that left us dizzy, tangled in the sheets, our bodies speaking a language of pure desire. The memory was so vivid it was physically painful, an erotic phantom limb that ached for a connection that was no longer there. Was she sharing that with Julian now? Was he discovering the little things I loved about her body? The thought was a hot poker to the gut. The juxtaposition of that remembered passion with the current, cold reality fueled a different kind of fire. It wasn't about winning her back anymore. It was about taking back control of a narrative that had been stolen from me. The predictable man was dead. In his place was a ghost, haunting the halls of his own life, watching, waiting, and planning. Part 4, The Art of Invisibility. The man Claire thought she knew, the one who left his socks on the floor and read the paper every morning, began to disappear. In his place was a strategist. I realized that my greatest asset was the very thing she despised, my predictability. She never looked for me in unexpected places or questioned my routines because she believed she had me completely figured out. I was a known quantity, a solved equation, so I used it. I became a master of my own camouflage. My Tuesday poker nights became my operational headquarters. I'd tell the guys I was hitting a rough patch at work and needed to leave early, and they'd clap me on the back, none the wiser. Those few hours became my time to work. I started with the phone bill. It was pathetically easy. Our account was online and I'd set it up years ago. I logged in and there it was in black and white, a single number, texted and called dozens of times a day, every day. A quick search of the number brought up a name, Julian Croft. His profile picture on a professional networking site showed a man who was my complete opposite. He was tanned and lean, with perfectly coiffed silver hair and teeth so white they looked like a special effect. His title was Lifestyle Architect and Personal Empowerment Coach. I almost laughed out loud. It was the most cliché thing I had ever seen. Claire, my intelligent, grounded Claire, was having an affair with a human buzzword. The dark humor was a lifeline. It kept the rage from boiling over. A lifestyle architect. What did he do? Design bespoke lives for bored, wealthy suburban women. Apparently so. Next, I needed to know the where, the logistics. I bought a small, magnetic GPS tracker online, the kind people use for their fleet vehicles. One evening, while Claire was in her long, post-yoga shower, I slipped out to the garage. My heart was pounding, a frantic drum against my ribs. It felt so cloak and dagger, so utterly outside the bounds of my normal life. I knelt by her SUV, the cold concrete pressing into my knees, and attached the small black box to the undercarriage, deep within the frame where it would never be seen. It was done in less than 30 seconds. As I stood up and brushed the dust from my hands, I felt a strange thrill, a surge of power that was both terrifying and intoxicating. I was no longer the passive victim. I was an active participant. I started a new journal, a little black book I kept hidden in my office desk drawer. Not a diary of feelings, but a logbook, dates, times, locations. The GPS tracker fed a constant stream of information to a secure app on a burner phone I'd bought. The entries began to paint a grim picture. Tuesday, 4:15 p.m., 6:30 p.m., the Lotus Loft Yoga Studio. Tuesday, 6:45 p.m., 8:30 p.m., the Oak Room Bar downtown. Thursday, 12:30 p.m., 3:00 p.m., the Westin Hotel, room 714. I got this detail by calling the hotel pretending to be from a courier service with a package for Julian Croft, asking to confirm his room number for delivery. The front desk clerk, bless her bored heart, gave it to me without a second thought. I was building a case, brick by brick. Every piece of data was a stone in the new foundation I was laying for my life, a life without her. The irony was thick enough to choke on. I, the boring, predictable man, was running a covert surveillance operation, while she, in her quest for excitement, had fallen into the most predictable trap of all, a sleazy affair with a smooth-talking charlatan. She thought she was living a thrilling secret life, but I knew her every move. The predictable man had become the puppet master, and I was just getting started. Part 5, Gaslight and Gasoline. Armed with the cold, hard data of Claire's betrayal, I decided to test the waters. I needed to see how she would react under pressure, how deep her deception truly ran. I stopped being a complete ghost and began a campaign of subtle psychological warfare, all while wearing the mask of the concerned, slightly oblivious husband. One evening, as she was getting ready for her book club, I wandered into our bedroom. She was putting on earrings, a new pair I'd never seen before, delicate silver feathers. "New earrings?" I asked, keeping my tone light. "They're beautiful," she touched one self-consciously. "Oh, these. Susan gave them to me for my birthday early, a little something to cheer me up." "That's nice of her," I said, walking over to my dresser. I paused. "Book club is at Susan's tonight, right? Say hi for me." I saw her reflection in the mirror hesitate for a fraction of a second. The GPS told me her book club was, in fact, at the Oak Room Bar, where Julian was likely waiting. "Of course," she said, her voice a little too bright. "Will do." The lie was effortless, a well-oiled part of her new machinery. Another time, I accidentally stumbled upon a credit card statement I'd requested be mailed to the house instead of sent electronically. I left it on the kitchen island, open to a page with a charge for $200 at a fancy restaurant downtown called Viver. Later that evening, I brought it up. "Hey, honey, I was looking at the Visa bill. Saw a charge for Viver. Did you take one of your clients there? That place is pricey." She didn't even blink. She was chopping vegetables, the rhythmic thud of the knife the only sound for a moment. "Oh, that." I took the whole team from my last project out to celebrate. They deserved it. Another lie, another piece of her invented reality. I knew from my logbook that the charge was from last Thursday, the same day her SUV had been parked at the Westin for 2.5 hours. It was a lunch for two, not a team celebration. The gaslighting was constant and infuriating. She'd weave these elaborate narratives, casting herself as a busy, social, engaged woman, while painting me as the slightly paranoid, out-of-touch husband. "Mark, you seem so tense lately," she said one night, placing a cool hand on my shoulder. I almost flinched. "Is everything okay at work? You're so quiet." It was a masterstroke of manipulation. She was creating a problem, my supposed stress, to distract from the real one. It was all I could do to not laugh in her face. I just sighed and played my part. "Yeah, just a lot on my plate, big project, you know how it is." "You should take up a hobby," she suggested, her voice dripping with faux concern. "Something to get you out of your head. You're becoming so predictable." She actually said the word. She dropped it into the conversation like a casual observation, having no idea it was the very word that had armed me. It was like watching someone hand their executioner a freshly sharpened axe. That was the moment my resolve hardened from steel into diamond. This wasn't just about exposing an affair anymore. This was about reclaiming my reality from the woman who was trying so desperately to rewrite it. Her lies were the gasoline, and she was pouring them all over the life we had built. I was just waiting for the right moment to strike the match. Part 6, An Unlikely Alliance. My plan was solid, but it was lonely. I was an army of one, fighting a war no one else knew was happening. The isolation was starting to wear on me. I needed an anchor, someone in the real world to confide in, someone who could confirm I wasn't going crazy. The answer came from an unexpected place: Claire's younger sister, Jenna. Jenna was the opposite of Claire in almost every way. Where Claire was polished and reserved, Jenna was messy, loud, and brutally honest. She worked as an nurse, had a sleeve of tattoos, and had never been afraid to call her sister out. They loved each other, but there was always a friction there, a clash between Claire's curated perfection and Jenna's raw authenticity. I'd always gotten along with Jenna. She saw me as the stable, dependable guy who grounded her sometimes flighty sister. She never seemed to judge my predictable nature. In fact, I think she appreciated it. I invited her for coffee under the pretense of wanting advice on a 45th birthday gift for Claire. We met at a small cafe halfway between our houses. For 20 minutes, we made small talk about her crazy hospital shifts and my kids' college exploits. Finally, I couldn't keep the charade up any longer. "Jenna," I started, my voice lower, "I need to talk to you about something else." "It's about Claire." She put her coffee cup down, her expression instantly serious. Nurses have a sixth sense for trouble. "Is she okay?" "She's fine," I said, shaking my head. "We're not." And then the floodgates opened. I told her everything: the overheard phone call, the name Julian, the lies about her whereabouts, the GPS tracker. I laid it all out, the whole ugly, methodical truth. I expected shock, maybe even disbelief or accusations. Instead, she just listened, her gaze never leaving my face. When I finished, she let out a long, slow breath and slumped back in her chair. "Julian Croft," she said, her voice laced with disgust. "The lifestyle architect, Jesus, Claire." My head snapped up. "You know him?" "Not personally," she spat, "but I know the type. One of the doctors I work with, her sister, got tangled up with him last year. He's a parasite. He finds unhappy women with money and tells them everything they want to hear until he's bled their bank accounts dry or gotten what he wants. He's a professional homewrecker." Hearing her confirm my worst fears was both devastating and profoundly validating. I wasn't just a paranoid husband. This was real. This was a pattern. I had a feeling something was up, Jenna continued, swirling the dregs of her coffee. "Claire's been different. She's been talking about living her authentic life and manifesting her destiny." I thought it was just some midlife crisis yoga crap. I didn't realize it had a name. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a surprising amount of empathy. "Mark, I am so sorry. You don't deserve this. You've been nothing but good to her." "What do I do, Jenna?" I asked, the question raw and real. She leaned forward, her expression hardening. "You don't just roll over. My sister is smart, but she's being an idiot. She's in a fantasy world and she needs a serious dose of reality. What's your plan?" I hesitated, then decided to trust her completely. "Her 45th birthday party is in 2 weeks. She's planning this big, fancy catered affair at the house. All her new goddess friends will be there, and I'm willing to bet my pension that Julian will be, too." A slow, wicked grin spread across Jenna's face. "Oh, this is going to be good," she said, her eyes gleaming with a kind of righteous fire. "What do you need from me?" In that moment, I was no longer an army of one. I had an ally, and she was on the inside. Part 7, The Birthday Present. With Jenna on board, the final 2 weeks became a masterclass in controlled deception. Claire was consumed with party planning, a whirlwind of caterers, florists, and playlist curation. Her excitement was palpable, but I knew it wasn't just about turning 45. This party was her stage, a chance to show off her new, enlightened life to her new friends. I was to be a background player, the dependable, predictable husband who would write the checks and smile benignly. It was the perfect cover. Jenna became my intel. She'd call Claire to gossip about the party, deftly extracting information. "So, is anyone special coming?" she'd ask, her tone syrupy sweet. Claire, eager to confide in someone, admitted that a very dear friend, a man who had helped her rediscover her passion, would be there. His name was Julian. She'd be introducing him to everyone as her life coach. The audacity was breathtaking. Meanwhile, I was preparing my birthday gift. I spent hours in my den, compiling the data I'd collected into a simple, elegant, and utterly devastating slideshow. I used a clean, corporate-looking template. Irony was my only remaining comfort. It started innocently enough: pictures of our wedding, the births of our kids, family vacations. The soundtrack was a soft, instrumental piece. Then about 3 minutes in, the tone would shift. The music would fade to silence. A simple title card would appear: The Last 6 Months. The slides that followed were a timeline of her secret life. A screenshot of the phone records, with Julian's number highlighted in red. A map showing her car's GPS location at the Westin, timestamped. A copy of the credit card bill with the charge from Viver, next to a photo I'd found on Julian's public social media of him and an unidentified woman's hand, wearing Claire's wedding ring, clinking champagne glasses. The caption reads, "Celebrating New Beginnings." The final slide was a simple, high-resolution photo. On one of my poker nights, I had driven to the Oak Room bar. I sat in my car across the street with a telephoto lens, a new hobby I'd apparently picked up. I waited, and I was rewarded. I got the shot: Claire and Julian, leaning in to kiss under the warm glow of the bar's sign, her hand on his chest, his on the small of her back. It was intimate, undeniable, and utterly damning. I rehearsed my speech, keeping it short, calm, and devoid of emotion. I wouldn't yell, I wouldn't cry. I would present the facts with the same detached professionalism I used in a quarterly logistics review. The predictable man was about to give the presentation of a lifetime. Jenna's role was crucial. She was to be my witness and my backup. She would arrive early, gauge the room, and make sure the large TV we had in the living room was connected to my laptop and ready to go. The day of the party arrived, a perfect, sunny Saturday. Claire was radiant, buzzing around the house, a goddess in her own domain. She kissed me as she passed, a quick, dry peck on the cheek. "Isn't this wonderful, honey?" she said, gesturing to the catered buffet and the white-jacketed bartender on our deck. "It's amazing, Claire," I said, and I meant it. The stage she had set for her triumph was about to become the theater of her downfall. Her friends arrived, a flock of women in flowing linen and expensive sandals. And then he arrived, Julian Croft. He was even more repellent in person. He glided into our home with an air of ownership, shaking hands, flashing his predatory smile. Claire introduced me. "Mark, this is Julian. He's the one I've been telling you about. He's changed my life." He took my hand in a grip that was too firm, his eyes holding mine for a second too long. "Mark, a pleasure. I've heard so much about you." "I'm sure you have," I said, my voice perfectly level. I gave him a tight, unreadable smile of my own. "Welcome to our home." The battle lines were drawn, the guests were assembled. All I had to do was wait for the right moment. Part 8, The Predictable Man's Gambit. An hour into the party, the backyard was filled with laughter and the clinking of wine glasses. Claire was holding court, Julian by her side, looking every bit the conquering hero. She tapped a glass for attention. "Everyone, thank you so much for coming to celebrate with me," she began, beaming. "This year has been one of incredible transformation for me, of finding my truth and my passion. And I have to thank my amazing friend and mentor, Julian, for guiding me on this journey." Julian gave a modest, condescending nod. This was my cue. I stepped forward, a warm smile plastered on my face. "And on that note," I said, my voice carrying over the crowd, "I'd like to share a little something I put together for my beautiful wife. A trip down memory lane for her 45th birthday." A chorus of awes rippled through the guests. Claire looked at me, a flicker of surprise mixed with patronizing affection in her eyes. The predictable husband doing a predictably sentimental thing. She motioned for everyone to gather in the living room, where the large TV screen was waiting. Jenna gave me a subtle nod from her position near the light switch. I clicked the remote. The slideshow began. The sweet, nostalgic photos of our life together filled the screen. Our wedding day, bringing our son home from the hospital, a goofy picture of us on a trip to the Grand Canyon. I stood beside the screen, providing quiet, fond narration. Claire stood next to me, her hand on my arm, playing the part of the adored wife. I could feel the tension in her grip, a sense of impatience, eager to get back to her real guest of honor. Then the last picture of our family faded to black. The music stopped. The room fell silent. The title card appeared in stark white letters on the black screen. The last 6 months. I felt Claire's hand tighten on my arm, her nails digging in slightly. A confused murmur went through the crowd. "Mark, what is this?" she whispered, her voice tight. "Just a little project I've been working on," I said softly, my eyes fixed on the screen. The first slide appeared, the phone records, a close-up of Julian's number called 287 times, then the GPS map of her car at the Westin. Then the credit card statement next to the Instagram photo of their champagne toast. With each slide, a gasp or a whisper rippled through the room. I didn't say a word, the evidence spoke for itself. Claire's grip on my arm was now like a vice, her breathing shallow. Her new friends were looking from the screen to her, their expressions shifting from confusion to shock to pity. Then came the final slide, the kill shot. The high-resolution photo of her and Julian kissing outside the bar. It filled the 65-inch screen in crystal-clear detail. It was undeniable. It was absolute. The silence in the room was a physical thing. It pressed in on my eardrums. I finally turned my head and looked at Claire. The color had drained from her face. Her eyes, wide with horror, darted from the screen to me, then to Julian, who looked like a cornered animal. I leaned in and whispered, just for her to hear, my voice calm and steady. "You said you wanted unpredictable. Is this unpredictable enough for you?" Then I turned back to the stunned crowd. "As it turns out," I said, my voice returning to a normal conversational volume, "my wife's journey of transformation had a co-pilot. So I'd like to propose a toast to Claire and her lifestyle architect, Julian. Thank you for showing me just how predictable I really was, and thank you all for coming. Please help yourselves to some shrimp cocktail on your way out. I believe the party is over." With that, I set the remote down on the coffee table, turned my back on the wreckage of my marriage, and walked out the back door onto the deck, breathing in the cool night air for the first time as a free man. Part 9, Echoes and Aftermath. The implosion was immediate and spectacular. I didn't watch it, but I heard it. A cacophony of hurried goodbyes, shocked whispers, and one shrill, panicked voice, Claire's, trying and failing to control the narrative. The exodus was swift. Within 15 minutes, the house that had been filled with laughter was silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the quiet, rhythmic splashing of the decorative fountain on the deck. Jenna found me out there, leaning against the railing, looking up at the stars. She handed me a beer. "Well," she said, taking a long sip from her own, "you certainly know how to blow up a party." "It needed to be done," I said, my voice hoarse. The adrenaline was starting to fade, leaving a vast, empty exhaustion in its wake. "She's a mess in there," Jenna reported, not unkindly, crying. "Julian, the coward, slunk out the side gate the second you walked away. Didn't even say goodbye, some lifestyle architect." We stood in silence for a while. It wasn't a celebratory moment. There was no triumphant fist-pumping. It was a somber, necessary amputation. I had surgically removed a diseased part of my life, but the phantom limb was already starting to ache. I didn't go back inside that night. I got in my car and drove. I ended up at a cheap motel off the highway, the kind with flickering fluorescent lights and threadbare carpets. I lay on top of the stiff comforter and stared at the ceiling, my mind a blank slate. The ghost had finally shown himself, and in doing so, had exorcised himself from his own home. The following days were a blur of logistics, the ugly, predictable mechanics of a life coming apart. I hired the most ruthless divorce attorney I could find. Armed with my meticulously documented evidence, the legal proceedings were swift and brutal. Claire, stripped of her ability to lie or gaslight, crumbled. She tried to fight, but the evidence was overwhelming. Julian, predictably, was nowhere to be found. He had disconnected his phone and vanished, leaving her to face the consequences alone. Our house, the portrait of our perfect life, was sold. We split the assets. I watched movers pack up 22 years of shared memories into cardboard boxes. I felt a pang of sadness, not for the woman she had become, but for the girl I had married, the one with the carefree laugh and the fierce love. I wondered where she had gone, and if she had disappeared long before Julian ever came along. My internal monologue was a debate society. What if I had just confronted her that first day? Could we have saved it? The logical part of me knew the answer. The betrayal wasn't just the affair, it was the contempt. The word predictable was the true killer. She hadn't just cheated on me, she had dismissed my very essence, the core of who I was. A marriage can sometimes survive infidelity. It can never survive contempt. Reconciliation was a path that existed only in an alternate universe, one I had no interest in visiting. This path, the one of scorched earth and clean breaks, felt more honest. It felt like my own. Part 10, My Unwritten Future. It's been a year now. I live in a small, modern apartment downtown with a balcony that overlooks the city. It's clean, it's minimalist, and it's entirely mine. There are no ghosts here. I didn't descend into a cliché of a divorced man's life. I didn't start drinking heavily or chasing women half my age. Instead, I started doing something I hadn't done in years. I surprised myself. I took up photography, the real kind, with the telephoto lens I had bought for a darker purpose. I found I had an eye for capturing the candid, unposed moments of life on the city streets. I took a cooking class and learned how to make pasta from scratch. I reconnected with my poker buddies not just as a cover, but as real friends. And one day, on a whim, I put a map of the United States on my wall. I threw a dart. It landed on a small town in Montana. 2 weeks later, I took a month of unpaid leave from work, an act so out of character it nearly gave my boss a heart attack, and I went. I drove my old, reliable sedan across the country. I hiked in the mountains, the air so clean it felt like it was scrubbing my soul. I sat in quiet diners, drinking coffee and talking to strangers. I felt the weight of the last 22 years slowly lift off my shoulders. I'm still predictable in some ways. I still like my coffee black and my routines efficient, but that's not the whole story anymore. It's just the foundation. What I build on top of it is now entirely up to me. My life is no longer a solved equation. It's a blank page, an open road. I heard through Jenna that Claire is living a few towns over. She's dating someone new. Jenna says she seems quieter, more subdued. I hope she's found whatever it was she was looking for. I hold no ill will towards her anymore. The anger has been replaced by a kind of distant, detached pity. She went looking for an unpredictable life and ended up with a predictable mess. I, on the other hand, was branded as the predictable man, and in the end my plan was anything but. I didn't just get revenge, I got my life back. My real, authentic, unwritten life, and I can't wait to see what happens next. If this story hit home, like and subscribe for more gripping tales of love and betrayal. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Would you forgive or seek revenge? What do you think Mark should do next on his journey? Your engagement helps us create more stories like this. Check out the next video popping up now for another twist-filled saga.